I'm delighted to open the session today with Professor Roger Matthews, very distinguished archaeological scholar who's done a lot to contribute to the subject area. And today he's going to be talking about archaeological research and cultural heritage of Iran. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Ba salam be huzar muhtaram. Sab bakhair. Kheli khosh amadid. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and my sincere thanks to the Iran Heritage Foundation for inviting me to deliver a talk at this important event and for looking after us so well. I'm especially delighted to be representing the University of Reading, newly established as an institutional partner of the IHF, enabling a young Iranian researcher to work and teach with us at Reading from 2015 onwards. And I'd like to acknowledge the collaborative input of Dr. Hassan Fazli Nashli, who's here in the audience today, in this presentation. So in this short talk, I'll consider major episodes in the ways in which archaeologists have approached the past of Iran over the past 150 years or so. I begin by emphasizing the global significance of Iran's past before taking a chronological review of archaeology in Iran. I will then discuss some current realities and future prospects with regard to conducting collaborative research in the archaeology of Iran. And there are two key elements that I hope to emphasize through the course of this talk. Firstly, to stress the development of archaeology from, I think it's fair to say, a rather clumsy and intrusive pursuit over the past 150 years or so into now a major collaborative interdisciplinary force for cultural enhancement. Secondly, my second point is to stress that we cannot overestimate the significance of individuals in shaping history. I think this is clear when we look at Iranian history, even at a glance, but also when we look at the history of archaeology in Iran, individuals have been absolutely critical to shaping that trajectory. And that is why I am basically an optimist about the future, because we are individuals with the power to shape our own histories for future reference. So, the significance of Iranian archaeology for major questions in human history. In studying the human past, Iran has good claim to host some of the most significant developments anywhere on the planet. Evidence for early hominin activities after the spread from Africa in the Paleolithic period are found in many parts of the country. After the last ice age from 10,000 BC, human communities across Iran began to settle down in villages and domesticate the wild animals and plants around them through the course of the Neolithic period, changing from hunter-foragers to farmers and animal herders, and being amongst the first in the world to do so. In later times, Iran was central to the rise of urban literate societies from 3000 BC, maximizing the value of its rich resources in the form of copper, silver, timber, and other commodities, underpinning Iran's key role in a complex phenomenon across the Near East often called the rise of civilization. Some of the oldest written documents in the world, in the still undeciphered Proto-Elamite script, which you see here at the bottom, come from a range of sites across Iran, Susa above all. From 2000 BC, Iran participated in a series of increasingly large and powerful empires, culminating in the Achaemenid Persian Empire of the mid-1st millennium BC, which we've been hearing quite a lot about, stretching from the eastern shores of Europe to the Central Asian deserts, and from the Aral Sea to the Nile Valley. In the footsteps of the great Achaemenid Empire, there followed a succession of regionally powerful states centered on Iran, including the Parthians and Sasanians, before the incorporation of Iran into the Islamic world. The archaeology of Iran thus provides a uniquely rich complex of research arenas within which to approach significant episodes of the human past. So a history of archaeology in Iran, I'm treating this in 5 major phases. Firstly, the birth and infancy of a discipline from 1800. Progress in approaching ancient Iran took a major step forward with Grottofan's identification in 1802 of the names of Achaemenid kings in the old Persian inscriptions at Persepolis, an achievement hugely augmented by Rawlinson's decipherment in the 1840s of the old Persian component of Darius the Great's trilingual Bisatun inscription near Kermanshah, which we heard about so spectacularly yesterday. The great significance of the decipherment of languages in cuneiform script was that it opened a new indigenous door on the past of countries such as Iran and Iraq, where previously biblical and classical traditions, largely originating from outside those countries, had shaped scholarly appreciation of their histories. The earlier development of archaeology in Iran went hand in hand with nascent Iranian nationalism in the Qajar period, in particular through the reign of Nasr ad-Din Shah. The basic tenet of Iranian nationalism was the notion of Iran as a nation with a distinctive identity that predated the Arab invasions and spread of Islam from the West. Archaeological excavations in Iran began in the mid-19th century with a site that was to prove of lasting and unique significance, Susa in Khuzestan. The first excavations at Susa were undertaken by British geologist Loftus in 1851, just a few years after Layard and Bota had made their astounding discoveries at the Assyrian capital cities of Khorsabad, Nimrud, and Nineveh in northern Iraq. The archaeology of Iran came to be dominated by French antiquarians from 1882 until the ratification of the Iranian Antiquities Law in 1930. Nasr ad-Din Shah's physician, Dr. Tolozin, persuaded the Shah to grant the Susa permit to Marcel and Jane Dieulafoy in 1882. Amongst their discoveries were an Achaemenid bull's head capital and much of a glazed brick frieze depicting royal arches of Darius the Great, both now on display in the Louvre Museum. Two remarkable conventions were agreed between Iran and France in 1895 and 1900, granting France exclusive rights to excavate in any part of Iran and stipulating that antiquities discovered in Susiana could go to France. Objects found outside that region would be divided between Iran and France. Between the signing of these agreements, a major development was in 1897 the founding of the Délégation Scientifique Française en Perse, directed until 1912 by Jacques de Morgan, who you see here. Jacques de Morgan constructed the fort or chateau on the Acropole mound that even today dominates the Susa skyline. De Morgan opened a massive trench on the Acropole mound, measuring 100 by 40 meters, digging in 5-meter steps. By these means, he intended to excavate 50,000 cubic meters per year, aiming for total excavation of the Acropole mound in about 50 years. Not achieved, we may probably be thankful. Significant numbers of clay tablets in cuneiform script were recovered, and their publication by the Assyriologist Shile, who you see on the right here, established the political entity of Elam as a major international protagonist of the Bronze Age and Iron Age Near East, alongside Assyria and Babylonia. Tablets of so-called Proto-Elamite type, dating to circa 3000 BC, were also recovered and still today form the largest, by far, assemblage of texts of that type. Also prime amongst de Morgan's finds were important Mesopotamian monuments that had clearly been taken from Babylonia to Susa as booty during Shutruk-Nahunte's campaign of 1158 BC, including the victory stele of Naram-Sin and the law code stele of Hammurabi of Babylon, also now in the Louvre Museum. At the base of his massive trench, de Morgan excavated a cemetery of 5th millennium BC date, comprising tombs with grave goods in the form of copper objects and finely painted pottery of Susa A type. Significant political developments within Iran started to impact on the archaeological scene at this time, namely a resurgence of Iranian nationalism culminating in the 1921 coup d'etat of Reza Khan, later Reza Shah. In 1922, the Society for the Preservation of National Heritage was founded in Tehran with the stated goal to enhance public interest in ancient knowledge and crafts and to preserve antiquities and handicrafts and their ancient techniques. The Society aimed to build a museum and library in Tehran and to ensure proper recording and registration of sites of heritage significance. A natural outcome of the rise of Iranian nationalism was the abolition in 1927 of the French concessions of 1895 and 1900. A National Conservation of Antiquities Act came into force in 1930, stipulating equal division of fines between Iran and the partner country. The French were now restricted to Susa and would be overseen by an Iranian government representative. A new Department of Antiquities was formed, and André Godard was appointed first director in 1929. His major achievements included a Journal of Iranian Archaeology and the building of the Iran Bastan Museum, which you see here, modeled on the Sasanian Palace at Ctesiphon in Iraq, officially opened by Reza Shah in 1937. The door was now open for wider international engagement. Internationalization of a discipline. A towering figure in this process was the German archaeologist Ernst Herzfeld, who we've already heard a little about. He had learned much about excavating in the Middle East through working with André at Ashur in Iraq, and had traveled extensively in Iran and published major works on sites such as Pasargadae, Persepolis, and Nakhchi-Rustam. Herzfeld's favored status in Iran can be partly attributed to his then radical view that modern states of the Middle East could best protect their own heritage by establishing active departments of antiquities themselves, a notion ahead of its time. Another major influence on Reza Shah's views on ancient Iran was the American art historian Arthur Upham Pope. Reza Shah was encouraged by Pope's ideas to pursue an agenda of state involvement in the curation of Iran's artistic and cultural heritage. Pope established the American Institute for Persian Art and Archaeology in New York in 1928, which supported expeditions to Iran, including Eric Schmidt's pioneering Holmes expeditions to Luristan, stimulated by the first appearance on the market of the so-called Luristan bronzes in 1928. In the same year, Herzfeld conducted excavations at Pasargadae, but his great desire was to excavate at the Achaemenid site of Persepolis, and his wish was granted by the Iranian authorities. The financial crisis in Europe, however, meant that no German institution could afford to support him, and he turned to the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago under its director, James H. Breasted, who appointed Herzfeld director of the Persepolis excavations from 1931. His excavations there set the scene for a modern understanding of Achaemenid archaeology, as we've already seen in a couple of papers. He investigated the major buildings on the monumental platform, and his interpretation of the function of these structures has largely persisted until today through retention of his nomenclature. Constructing a narrative of how the site of Persepolis might have been used by the Achaemenid royal family, and we saw this critiqued and developed in Michael Rove's paper yesterday. Also of enduring significance was the discovery of the so-called Fortification Archive, a collection of some 30,000 clay tablets in Elamite found in the fortification wall at the northeast end of the platform, major importance for approaching social, economic, and administrative aspects of the empire. Other American engagement in these years included expeditions sponsored by the University of Pennsylvania, by Vulsin at Tureng Tepe, by Schmidt at Tepe Hisar, and at Cheshme Ali near Ray, south of Tehran. Roman Gershman's excavations at Tepe Sialk and Schmidt's at Tepe Hisar have been seen by Bob Dyson as models at the time for the stratigraphic recovery of regional prehistoric sequences, and they remain of fundamental importance for understanding the prehistory of the Iranian plateau. An event of long-term significance was the opening of the Department of Archaeology at Tehran University in 1937. With the outbreak of the Second World War, foreign expeditions ceased work in Iran, while excavations continued at Persepolis under Iranian archaeologists led by Hossein Ravanbod. Following the end of the war, French excavations resumed at Susa from 1946, directed by Gershman, till 1967. From 1951 to 1962, Gershman also moved his attention to the site of Chilgazanbil, 50 kilometers southeast from Susa, concentrating on the massive Middle Elamite ziggurat of King Untash-Naparisha. The quantity and geographic spread of excavations in Iran gathered pace through the late 1940s and beyond. On behalf of the Office of Archaeology, Ali Sami carried out excavations at Pasargadae and Persepolis, while Mahmoud Rad and Ali Hakimi began excavations at Hassanlu in northwest Iran. Louis van den Berg of Ghent University had a major impact on the development of Iranian archaeology. His surveys and excavations at sites in Fars and Luristan since 1951 established a chronology for those regions from the Neolithic to the Iron Age. Japanese archaeologists Egami and Masuda began a long association of Japan with Iran's ancient past through their excavations at Talibakun in Fars in 1956. a golden age of Iranian archaeology. Several major episodes marked 1959 to 61 out as the start of what we may call a golden age in Iranian archaeology, and many have. Firstly, the year 1959 was graced by the publication of Vandenberg's seminal volume, L'Archéologie de l'Iran ancien. Secondly, under von der Osten and Naumann, a long-term German project at the Sasanian site of Tahti Suleiman brought sophisticated field and recording techniques into Iran. Thirdly, the Hassan Lu project became in 1959 a joint enterprise between the University of Pennsylvania and the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, expanding to include regional studies and excavations at nearby sites such as Haji Firuz, Dalma, Pisteli, and Dinkha, thereby introducing a host of talented young American and Canadian researchers to the discipline. Fourthly, the 1958 revolution in Iraq had terminated the Iraq JAMO project directed by Robert Braidwood of the Oriental Institute of Chicago. With the transfer of his fieldwork across the border into Iranian Kurdistan in 1959 to 60, Braidwood brought with him novel approaches of problem-oriented archaeology, executed by a team of specialists in the natural sciences, excavating at Neolithic sites in the Kermanshah region, including Asyab and Sarab. Frank Hole and Kent Flannery's Prehistory of Southwestern Iran project involves systematic excavation in the 1960s at several sites on the Dehluran plain in Khuzestan. This project, framed as an exercise in human ecology, involved the first use of water flotation to recover charred plant remains, a development that provided samples for the then new technique of radiocarbon dating. A hugely influential figure in Iranian archaeology from 1960 onwards was the Iranian archaeologist Ezat Negahban, who had studied at the Oriental Institute in Chicago and thereafter assumed positions as technical director of the Iranian Archaeological Service, lecturer at Tehran University, where he established the Institute of Archaeology. Often called the father of modern Iranian archaeology, he directed excavations at the Iron Age cemetery at Malik, and from 1965 to 78 turned his attention to the Elamite site of Haftape, as well as investigating multiple sites on the Qazvin plain, including Zareh. He played a key role in encouraging international involvement in the archaeology of Iran. The creation in 1972 of the Iranian Center for Archaeological Research, directed by Firuz Baghazadeh, who we heard about yesterday, set the seal on the maturity of archaeology in Iran, demonstrated through annual conferences where excavators reported on their previous season's results, a model since adopted by many other countries. 1961 saw the start of a long-term involvement by the Chicago Oriental Institute at Chogamish in Khuzestan, directed by Pinhas Delugaz and Helen Cantor. Project focused on the Proto-Literate period, but also investigated much earlier levels. A major program of survey and excavations in Kerman province concentrated on the multi-period site of Tepe Yahya, started in 1967 under the leadership of Karl Lambert-Karlowski on the camel here, of Harvard University, while Italian archaeologists worked at Shahri Sokhta in Sistan. Ali Hakemi excavated at the Bronze Age site of Shahdad. The winds of change arrived at Susa with the accession in 1967 of the prehistorian Jean Perrault, who, in collaboration with the Iranian Center for Archaeological Research and the University of Tehran, assembled an international team to do justice to the site. Under their guidance, stratigraphically controlled excavations began to establish a more secure chronology of occupation. Meanwhile, in 1969, the system of dividing excavated finds between host country and foreign partner was brought to an end, in line with policies adopted in other countries of the region and beyond. The openness of the discipline of archaeology in Iran in the 1960s encouraged the foundation of research institutes in Tehran. Key amongst these were the British Institute of Persian Studies with its journal Iran, the Tehran branch of the Deutsches Archäologisches Institut and its journal Archäologische Mitteilungen aus Iran. French and Italian institutes were also pursuing multiple lines of research, while scholars from America, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Japan, and others joined their Iranian colleagues in archaeological researches across Iran. At the same time, the University of Tehran trained waves of talented Iranian archaeologists who progressed to senior positions within Iranian archaeology, including Yusuf Majid-Zadeh, Sadek Malik Shah Mirzadeh, Masoud Azarnush, Mahmoud Musawi, and many, many others, too numerous to name. after the revolution from 1979. The Iranian Revolution brought an end to an age of international collaboration, exacerbated by the long Iran-Iraq War from 1980. Furthermore, because of Mohammad Reza Shah's co-option of the Achaemenid remains at Pasargadae and Persepolis into his 1971 celebrations of the 2500th anniversary of the foundation of the Persian Empire by Cyrus the Great, the new regime in Tehran regarded archaeology with suspicion. Tehran University's Department of Archaeology was closed down for 3 years, while the Institute of Archaeology lay dormant till 1990. In 1985, the Iranian Cultural Heritage Organization was formed, incorporating the Center for Archaeological Research, the Iran Bastan Museum, and other institutions. Steadily, international connections were re-established by Iranian colleagues in the years from 1995. The first joint project since the revolution fittingly involved an Iranian archaeologist based at the Chicago Oriental Institute, Abbas Alizadeh, who carried out surveys in Fars in 1995 with colleagues from ICHO, followed by excavation at Chogha Bonut in Suziana in 1996. Equally positive was the foundation from 1988 of new university departments of archaeology at Tarbiyat-e-Madaris in Tehran, the Free University at Abha Kazarun in Tehran, Zahidan, and Bu Ali Sina Hamadan. Rebirth of a discipline. The wave of positive change came to a head with the election of President Khatami in 1997 and has broadly continued since then. ICAR was refounded in 2003 and its activities hugely enhanced by its director Masoud Azarnouch, who was keen that Iranian archaeologists meet the challenge posed by programs of civil construction and development throughout Iran. We'll be hearing about these in the next paper from Dr. Hassan Fazli. New Iranian projects began at Jiroft in Halil Rud in southeast Iran, at Sialk, and multiple projects directed by colleagues in ICAR and university departments. Major collaborative projects have got underway over the past 15 years, even if there have been breaks entirely due to fluctuating diplomatic relations. Amongst these have been projects at Arisman, Mamasani, Qazvin and Tehran Plains, Central Zagros Archaeological Project, Gorgan Wall, and many, many others, too numerous to mention here. But of most significance for the archaeology of Iran has been the development of indigenous capability over the past 15 years, particularly within the university environment. This development has been especially marked in the field of prehistoric archaeology, with a new focus on periods of Iran's distant past. These projects have included ambitious programs of radiocarbon dating, as well as integrated approaches to archaeological landscapes, environments, sites, and past lifeways. As an illustration of these positive developments, in 2013, it was possible for no fewer than 21 Iranian archaeologists employed by 10 different universities across Iran to contribute articles to a study of the spread of farming in Neolithic Iran, on the bottom left here, edited by myself and Dr. Hassan Fazli Nashli. Current challenges and opportunities, just for the last couple of minutes. As archaeologists active in fieldwork and research in Iran now for many years, my wife, Associate Professor Wendy Matthews, and I are optimistic that we can sustain high-quality collaborative research with our Iranian colleagues. Over the past years, we've been successful in obtaining large grants from UK and EU sources to conduct collaborative research with Iranian colleagues, sometimes in challenging circumstances, politically and diplomatically. Skills exchange, knowledge transfer, and public engagement are always key components of these collaborative projects. We plan to resume our fieldwork in Iran later this year. To that end, we at Reading are currently establishing new memoranda of understanding with 2 Iranian universities, Tehran and Bu Ali Sina Hamadan. And as Hassan mentioned earlier, we also have a new project with the Faculty of Geography at Tehran University to investigate ancient climate of Iran through study of cores taken from lake bed deposits, supported by the British Academy. The challenges we face are bureaucratic and relate to issues such as obtaining visas when diplomatic relations are yet to be fully restored, taking teams of students to Iran when Foreign and Commonwealth Office advice means our universities cannot provide insurance. In the context of steadily improving diplomatic relations between the UK and Iran, we remain as determined as ever to encourage, plan, and carry out world-leading collaborative research with our Iranian colleagues. When politicians and diplomats stop talking to each other, as they often do, We, as academics, uniquely sustain the dialogue, and we provide the platform for genuine international cultural engagement, of which this symposium is a highly significant part. Thank you very much.